Fred Murray is driving to pick his daughter Maura up from the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. Little does he know that in only 3 days, she will disappear.
When Maura got to UMass, I'd go up there once a month or so. In fact, last weekend I saw her. I was up at UMass and we went searching to find a car. So get her a car, to go to do her nursing clinical trips and stuff like that.
21-year-old Maura Murray has juggled a busy college schedule, running track and cross-country, and working 2 part-time jobs. Besides studying, she must do work for her nursing degree that requires long drives from campus.
Now, Maura had a car with her in Amherst, but the car was falling apart. It was really time for her to get a new car.
Maura's rundown car will figure prominently in her disappearance 3 days later.
And we had one worked out. We're going to go up the next weekend and get it. But that didn't happen. It would have been safe. I wish I had bought it that weekend.
According to Fred Murray and Maura's friends at the time at UMass, it seemed to be a pretty normal weekend. Her father was visiting, everything seemed fine.
And that night in Amherst, we went to the Amherst Brew Pub and had supper. Whenever we went to some place, especially if it's a college town or something like that, if we could find a brew pub, we would go to it,
But the events of that weekend would create a mystery even her closest friends can't explain.
Maura and I grew up in a small town called Hanson, Massachusetts. We had a tight group of friends and we stayed close all the way through high school and into college and always stayed in touch.
There was 7 of us that were always together. If something was really bothering Maura, she definitely would have come out and one way or another hinted at something was wrong.
The last time we hung out with Maura, everything seemed totally normal. We didn't notice anything different with her.
Maura's life seems to be on the right track, both at school and with her family. Her friends know Maura is particularly close to her father.
The first basketball team Maura and I played on, our dads were both coaches. Maura and her dad were very close growing up. She lived with her mom, but her dad was here picking her up for practices, bringing her to games.
Her parents divorced when she was 6 years old, and she remained living with her mother, but she maintained a very close relationship with her father.
It seemed like the last weekend Maura and her dad had spent together was pretty typical of their relationship.
After enjoying their brewhouse dinner that Saturday night, Fred let Maura borrow his new car. She drops him off at his motel. Then, the weekend takes a sudden and unexpected turn.
Sunday morning, Maura woke me up. She had come back, during the night and told me that she had had an accident in my car.
She was involved in an accident in Hadley, Mass., where she went off the road and struck a set of guardrails. She was driving her father's new car at the time and did about $10,000 worth of damage.
Well, Maura was upset, and it haunts me, but, I think she felt she let her father down.
At 4:49 a.m. Sunday morning, a distraught Maura calls her long-distance boyfriend, Billy Rausch, who is stationed in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Billy later shares the conversation with his mother, Sharon.
So she calls Billy, and he talked with her, he calmed her down. And then he promised her that he would call her back later in the day.
Maura and Billy have been dating since 2001. They met while both were attending West Point.
From the moment I met her, I knew that she loved my son, and of course that endeared her to me.
When Maura decided to transfer from West Point to UMass, Billy and Maura continued their relationship, spending many holidays and summers with Billy's family.
By the time that she was here over the holidays in 2003 and early 2004, they shared that, they were talking of getting married.
I think Maura looked at Sharon as if she was a second mom. She always went out there, and we knew that she was excited to go.
To describe Maura as a challenge, I don't want to say she's complex, but she was so multifaceted, you know. She could be serious, she could be so funny and witty. She always had this little soft giggle, and she was very soft-spoken, but she was fun-loving. She loved life, she loved to laugh.
The next day, when Fred Murray sees his daughter, she's still upset about the accident.
I drove her back to the dorm. I could see she was still upset. I told her it would be all right. It was going to be covered. It would be okay, you know? And she went into the dorm, and that's the last I ever saw of her, which will haunt me forever.
A few hours later, at 11:26 p.m., Maura speaks on the phone with her father one final time.
Checked on my insurance. I called her back, said, we're okay. The insurance will be taken care of, so I'm not going to be out a lot of money. I said, you're going to have to make out accident reports, probably in triplicate. So get the 3 forms from the police station or wherever you have to get them, and call me tomorrow night, 8 o'clock.
But Maura's call to her father will never take place, and her actions will surprise everyone who knows her.
There was no death in the family. She did lie.
In the weekend before she goes missing, UMass nursing student Maura Murray has been in an accident after borrowing her dad's car, but her father thinks that crisis is past.
The car would get fixed, and my insurance would cover it. And so Maura's all right, so I figured if this is the most trouble this kid ever causes me in 21 years, then I am lucky. I'm a lucky guy.
But what Maura does later that night, she doesn't share with her father or any of her friends.
An opportunity to look at some of the files on her computer. She had looked at some sites specific to rental properties in the White Mountains region of New Hampshire. She finished up working on her computer at about 4 a.m.
Maura continues her online search the next day.
It appears she got back on her computer on the afternoon of the night, and during the course of a couple hours, searched several sites to include getting directions from Amherst, Mass. To the Burlington, Vermont area.
Here she was looking for different directions up to New Hampshire, and I think onto Burlington, Vermont. I mean, it would seem a little strange, especially since classes had just started.
No one knows what Maura was planning the day before she disappears, but her last cell phone calls leave clues.
We have Maura's cell phone records because her cell phone was an additional line to Billy's cell phone. So, Billy not only gave her a phone for Christmas, he paid the monthly bill. When his bill came, then, we automatically saw all the calls that she made.
At 12:55 p.m. Monday, February 9th, 2004, Maura calls the owner of a Bartlett, New Hampshire condo rental. Her father recognizes the town. It's a place Maura knew well.
She was going to Bartlett. There's no question. She was going to Bartlett, and that's what she knows. She's familiar with. She stayed in every place in Bartlett. She can get a room there, and even if she can't, she knows other places. Maura has been coming up here since she was born.
Maura grew up every summer and parts of winters and springs and falls going all up through New Hampshire. She's hiked so many of those mountains up there with her dad.
They wanted to do the highest mountains as best they could. She loved hiking.
Maura's friends know her to be very athletic, excelling at many sports.
Maura played just about every sport possible growing up. Maura and I were always on the same teams, and we were captains of the cross-country team senior year. But she was always the one leading the pack and winning most of just about all of the races, and including doing top finishes in the state.
She was recruited to West Point for her running ability.
After transferring from West Point, she attended the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where she ran track and cross country. Back at her dorm room that February afternoon, just hours before her disappearance, Maura sends an email to her boyfriend.
He did receive an email from her that day, around 1 or 1:30, and in that email, she told him that she loved him and that she was sorry she hadn't returned his messages from the day before. She hadn't felt like talking to much of anyone.
Whatever Maura's state of mind is, she makes a number of phone calls that afternoon.
made another phone call to 1-800-GO-STOW, which is a reservation phone line for hotels in the Stowe, Vermont area. But research shows that at the time that Maura called, the line was actually out of order. So Maura could listen to listings for different hotels, but she could not actually make a reservation on this line. But that just shows that Maura, again, was looking for a place to stay in the Vermont, New Hampshire area.
Then, 13 minutes after phoning the Go Stowe hotline, Maura calls her boyfriend, but gets his voicemail.
She didn't say much other than promising to call him. Sorry she missed him.
Maura hasn't told anyone she's thinking about leaving town. She finally shares her plans, but it's not with anybody close to her.
Maura had sent an email to her nursing professors. I don't know word for word, but in it she told them that she needed to be away for a week due to a death in the family.
Her friends know there has been no death in Maura's family.
We thought it was a little bizarre when we first heard that Maura had sent an email to professors saying, "There's a death in the family, I have to take off for a week."
Not really like her, but if something was going on, she did need to get away, then kind of explains it. Why she didn't call one of us, I don't know. I mean, maybe we could have helped her out, figured something out together.
She did lie, but Maura was not a liar.
Around 3:30, we assume Maura got into her car at UMass Amherst and left the campus. Her first stop was to an ATM machine where she withdrew $280. That pretty much depleted Maura's account with that bank. Maura then stopped at a local liquor store. At the liquor store, Maura bought a bottle of Kahlua, a bottle of Bailey's, a bottle of vodka, and a box of red wine.
Maura's stop to the liquor store is known because the receipt of what she purchases is later found in her wrecked car.
Kahlua, Bailey's, and vodka are known for making a White Russian. No one understands why Maura bought such a large quantity of alcohol for if she was traveling alone.
There was surveillance camera at the ATM, so we could see still photographs where she walked up to the ATM, withdrew the money, and there didn't appear to be anybody in the background or anywhere that we could see from the camera photos.
It's 4:37 p.m., and phone records show Maura checks her voicemail. This is the last known call from Maura's cell phone. Presumably, at this point in the afternoon, she's now driving towards New Hampshire.
She had an extremely adventurous spirit. When we first heard that Maura had taken off and gone up to New Hampshire, it seemed a little odd to us, but not totally, because I remember a day in high school that she decided she just wanted to go off and do something different, so she hopped on the train herself, went to Boston, didn't necessarily tell us, but by the end of the day she was back after all of us had been spending the whole day trying to track her down.
The next day, Maura's father will hear the worst news of his life.
Your daughter's missing. She's in an accident. The police don't seem to know where she is.
It's Monday afternoon, February 9th, 2004. Momentarily, this 21-year-old nursing student will go missing. It seems she's planning a getaway, but connecting the clues is complicated.
As to why Maura left, I don't know. In my position as father, you would think that maybe there would have been something said but I have no hint. I thought everything was okay, you know?
Some think perhaps Maura is not doing well at school, and that's why she's leaving.
I wasn't aware of any stuff like school troubles. She was on the dean's list in a very difficult program, a nursing program. Hard to get in, hard to do well in.
When it came to academics, she was always very serious and one of the top members of our class by the time we all graduated.
The recipients this year are the 5 top-ranking students in the senior class. The awards are $400 to Maura Murray.
I think everybody felt that she was doing okay at school, but there also were some issues I think that were causing her great stress in her private life.
Around 5 p.m., Monday, February 9th, this Dean's List student is on the road, driving a rundown car hours away from her dorm, without telling anybody where she is going.
I knew she was having car trouble. We had gotten her a AAA membership with the long distance towing. because we were concerned about her.
It was pretty cold. The road was slippery.
Fred Murray is tracing his daughter's last known steps.
She went west on, I would say, 116 into Route 91, which we're on now.
She's driving away from her UMass Amherst storm towards New Hampshire.
She's going to take this right down until she finds 112 East. This is what she was looking for. I wish she had gone straight.
And after traveling over 140 miles,
Mara is not familiar with this area.
around 7:30 p.m., her car veers off the road.
Mara came around the corner, and so the car wasn't running properly. It impacted right down here. There was a big snowbank here. It's so dark here. If you're looking in this direction, you can't see your hand in front of your face.
This is Maura's second car accident in 3 days. A school bus driver stops to help her.
I just asked her how she was. She said she was shaken up. I couldn't see any blood on her face. And she was shaking like this. I says, okay, I'm going to go call the police.
What the bus driver told us, she didn't appear to be hurt. He offered to call the police for assistance, and she really asked him not to. She said that she had called AAA, but it being in the location of the mountains, he also knew that there was no cell phone coverage there. So he was quite convinced that she hadn't been able to make that call. So he went home, which was a short distance down the road, and called the local police department.
Around 10 minutes later, at 7:45 p.m., police arrive at the accident scene, looking for any trace of the driver.
The police officer at the scene noticed that the windshield was broken in front of where the driver would be seated. The airbags had gone off. There was damage to the front end of the vehicle. When he got there, he found that there was nobody with the vehicle.
In the blink of an eye, this vivacious, athletic young co-ed disappears.
He noticed that there was a box of wine, like a 5-liter box of wine, behind the driver's side seat. He could see that through the window. He noticed in the snow what appeared to be something pink that had been poured into the snow. Subsequently, when they removed the vehicle, he found a Coke bottle, and it smelled like there had been an alcoholic beverage in that bottle.
I spoke with the one witness that actually talked to Maura Murray that night at the accident scene. That witness says that Maura appeared a bit shook up, but she did not appear intoxicated.
There didn't appear to be any evidence at the scene which would indicate anything other than she had left the scene under her own power. There wasn't any evidence of a struggle of any kind. The vehicle was locked.
The police officer at the scene of the accident searches the surrounding area. Maura is nowhere to be found.
The initial accident investigation, led the police officers to believe that this was simply a case of someone who had been involved in a motor vehicle accident and did not wish to, at least initially that night, have contact with the police.
The next day, police speak on the phone with Maura's family.
As a result of those conversations, they then became concerned that Maura might be depressed. Her father described it, that she was depressed in having crashed his car on Saturday night.
Fred Murray remembers receiving the shocking and mystifying news.
The way I felt was just the world just stopped. Your daughter's missing. She's in an accident. It's in the woods, way up, and not in New Hampshire. The police don't seem to know where she is. I couldn't. I wanted to get up here immediately.
The next morning, Maura's boyfriend receives a strange voicemail message.
The message basically, in and of itself, was just a woman breathing and then possibly a whimper or some sort of noise at the end, which we believe to be her.
I don't know why she came to New Hampshire. I don't know. I'd be guessing the same with everybody else.
It's Wednesday, February 11th, 2004. Fred Murray has just driven all night from his work in Bridgeport, Connecticut, after hearing his daughter's car has been abandoned, far away from her dorm room, and she is nowhere to be found.
I get up here at daybreak, to join the search.
Maura's mother, Lori, is living a mother's worst nightmare. She's unable to leave her home in Hanson, Massachusetts to join the search due to a fractured ankle.
Eventually, the rest of my family showed up, and Bill Rausch, Maura's boyfriend, and his mother and father, Bill and Sharon, showed up.
But during his trip from Fort Sill, Oklahoma to New Hampshire, Maura's boyfriend, Billy, receives a mysterious voice message on his cell phone.
Billy called frantic around 7 a.m. on Wednesday morning. And he says, Mom, he said, while I was going through security, I missed a call. And he said, I'm sure it was Maura.
The message basically, in and of itself, was just a woman breathing and then possibly a whimper or some sort of noise at the end, which we believe to be her.
He said there was some, really soft sobbing and shivering sounds and sniffing. And he said, I don't know what to do. He said, I called it back, and it says it's a prepaid calling card.
They have hope the call is from Maura, since Sharon knows Maura uses prepaid calling cards.
Before Maura had her cell phone, she called Billy with prepaid calling card. And when Maura was here for Thanksgiving in 2003, I gave her 2 prepaid calling cards. And so that's always, added to our belief that it's very likely that Maura made that very unusual call that Billy received that morning.
Once in New Hampshire, the family frantically searches for Maura.
So we found a place to stay locally, and we started setting up a kind of like a command central and making a lot of calls and trying to get some flyers together.
What we're doing is we're working from the crash site, working out, and it's going to be encompassing about a half a mile radius to start. Again, we're looking for any sign, so had she gone into the woods, she had to have left some sign behind. We got the state police helicopter up there the first thing the next morning to do a search from the air. I also had our bloodhound that's assigned to the troop respond and do a search of the ground.
The state police brought a dog, and the dog was given a glove, but it was a brand new glove that Maura had just gotten for Christmas. But if they had asked me, I'd have given them something that she used all the time, like running gear or something like that. But I don't know. Maybe she did wear it, but it was pretty new. The dog followed the scent up to about here, where the dog lost it.
The abrupt loss of the scent over 100 feet away from the accident scene leads to speculation that Maura may have gotten into a passing vehicle.
We did an intensive search of the crash scene area for evidence that she may have walked into the woods. Nothing like that was uncovered. Do police make mistakes? Do we miss things? Absolutely. We just want to make sure we're doing everything that we can to locate this missing girl and get her back to her family.
Police question Maura's boyfriend and speak with his parents.
After we arrived in Haverhill on Wednesday, Billy was questioned extensively. They gave us a press release.
Maura is described as endangered and possibly suicidal.
Well, in any press release, you want to let the public know, especially if you're looking for help. So you want to give those details so that someone who lives in the area or wherever will just be on the lookout for something out of the ordinary. So that information was included in the early press releases that she might be depressed and she may have come up here to harm herself.
So they proceed to tell us that there's no evidence of foul play. Maura is 21 years old. She is an adult. She has the right and the privilege to go missing of her own choice. We're thinking, oh, this can't be. She's gone. That's our foul play. Our Maura is gone.
And while her family and friends are trying not to lose hope,
Maura's loved ones are interviewed by the media. They hope to get the news of her disappearance out to the public in case anyone can help.
As long as I'm here, I want to use every minute. As long as it's still daylight, I want to be out there.
Driving east all the way to Maine, heading up north close to the Canadian border.
I'm getting more fearful by the hour. I'm scared. and I'm desperate.
It's not something we want to dwell on, but we're keeping, we're trying to stay logical and rational, and it just appears that someone more than likely picked her up with bad intentions.
I don't think she's able to contact us. There was no way that she would ever not contact us.
No matter what, they still cling to hope that somewhere out there, Maura may be listening.
Everybody's here looking for you, and just call any one of us. We'll come right down and get you. Don't be afraid, please.
I love you, Maura. I miss you so much, obviously, you know that. And the sooner that I get to see you and be with you again, obviously, the better.
So please, kid, if you're listening to me, we can just bang away at this stuff the same as we do all the time until we fix it.
Meanwhile, police search Maura's car, looking for some trace, some clue as to where she has gone.
Maura's belongings were released to Billy. Billy brought her belongings back to the motel on Friday, February 13th. She had her running clothes. She had a bag with her school books, which include her syllabus. So it shows every intent on doing her schoolwork while she was away. She had every intent on maintaining her, her exercise regimen.
Also found in Maura's car was a book titled Not Without Peril. It was a book chronicling different hikers that had gone into the presidential range of New Hampshire's mountains, and they either never returned or they were badly injured.
Book Not Without Peril was in Maura's car because Maura and I climbed Mount Washington. When you read the book, it mentions all these different trails and all the different adventures, some ending happily, some ending in death. People have frozen to death up there. But for the most part, it's uplifting.
Some people speculate, why was Maura reading this particular book? A book about hikers that go into the mountains and never return. But others say this was just one of Maura's favorite books.
With nothing to go on but hope, Maura's family is determined to continue looking for her. During their search, Maura's sister discovers a disturbing potential clue.
Women's underwear were found right down here, more on top of the ice than buried in it. We turned the underwear into the state police, but never heard another word.
There were some items of clothing that were turned into law enforcement. We did forensic testing on those and were able to determine that they were not, in fact, belonging to Maura.
After weeks of constant searching,
I've searched all down through here.
Devastated and exhausted, Maura's loved ones return home.
I personally search any place that would be significant to her, that would be meaningful, that we went to a lot, that would be special for Maura, but she hadn't been to any of those places.
But witnesses are about to come forward, including one who claims to have seen the young Maura Murray.
The young woman had her arms folded in front of her and seemed to be mouthing the words, "Help me."
After that fateful February 9th, 2004, when his daughter disappears from the scene of her one-car accident, Fred Murray hopes for answers, even though there seems to be no leads and no suspects.
Fred, God has just really blessed him and giving him the strength. At his age, he goes up there week after week after week, and he keeps searching the sides of the roads. He keeps searching the woods.
Months after Maura's disappearance, Sharon and Fred decide to do more follow-up, investigating Maura's final cell phone calls themselves.
It wasn't until Fred and I decided in the fall of 2004 that we were going to go back to square one and check some things out that I called these phone numbers.
Hello? I picked up the phone, and it was Sharon. She had said that she obtained Maura's cell phone records, and that I was one of the last people to speak with her, and that she had gone missing.
Linda and her husband own a condo in Bartlett, New Hampshire. And Fred and Maura and Billy had stayed there in late summer of 2003. At the time that I learned this, I went online, and this condo by the Salamones was the least expensive to rent. So I'm confident that that is why that Mara chose that one.
This 12:55 p.m. call on February 9th, 2004, lasts 3 minutes. Unfortunately, Linda Salamoni is unable to remember more about her conversation with Maura because she is contacted so many months afterwards.
I felt like I might have been able to help at that time if I had just received a phone call. I could have said, yes, she sounded distressed, or no, she was okay, and this is where she was heading, or whatever, any little bit. So then I felt very frustrated because I still, felt I might have been able to help.
One thing Linda is sure of, she didn't rent a condo to Maura that week.
There was no way for her to get in. We would have to give her the keys. We would make sure that we knew who we were renting it to.
Fred Murray is frustrated with the lack of progress in the case.
Fred has also filed a lawsuit against the state police of New Hampshire and the local police of New Hampshire, trying to obtain the records, the documents pertaining to the Maura Murray case.
My only relief would be the FBI coming in or getting the release of the case records myself. And neither one's going to happen because the court system backs up the state police.
Court decisions have ruled that records relating to the case cannot be released to the public, stating it would interfere with future law enforcement proceedings.
At some point, we may get that piece of evidence which says that she was the victim of a crime, and in solving that case, you want to be able to have everything that you've done from the beginning to that point forward admissible in court if you have to go to trial.
To add to the mystery and the frustration, reporter Maribeth Conway says she spoke to a witness who says she actually encountered Maura Murray, looking very distressed.
She saw a young woman with an older man, a man probably in his 60s. The young woman had her arms folded in front of her and seemed to be mouthing the words, "Help me." The woman finally realized what was happening, but before she really had a chance to do anything about it, the young woman and the man left. The woman did not get license plate numbers or any further of a description of this young girl. She swears that this young woman is Maura Murray.
We've had reported sightings of Maura in Rochester, New Hampshire, in Vermont, in other states. We've always determined that it was not, in fact, Maura.
The interesting thing about the Maura Murray case is that there are so many theories still to this day. Maura was possibly suicidal. She was possibly running away. She could also have been kidnapped.
When the press releases came out about her being suicidal and all the other absurd theories, it was very hard to read. I mean, yeah, people can think what they want, but those that know her know that she was a happy person.
There's no evidence of suicide. You're talking about a kid full of life, with every possible thing to live for. She's getting out of nursing school. She's going to have a great job. She's getting ready to get married. Got a whole future.
When Maura went missing, there were many things that were said. One of the things was that, Maura has run off with another boyfriend, and Billy, was confronted with this, and he said, I hope she has. If she is with another young man, then she is safe.
I think we never thought it would go past a few days. We just thought eventually she'd turn up and there'd be answers, and maybe she'd have a great story to tell after the fact. Some adventure happened. Never thought that 4.5 years later, 5 years later, we'd just have more questions than answers. So this is Maura's last email to the group of girls.
Maura's friends feel her last email to them proves she was not planning any sort of long-term getaway.
She writes, Dane Cook is playing at UMass, and we went to get tickets and it was sold out. I missed out again. But I did some research and he plays in Storrs, Connecticut, February 12th, not too from UMass. She points out that it's February 12th, so it would be 3 days after she actually went missing. So to me, it shows that that's not someone who is trying to take off permanently. She wouldn't just make plans and then completely ditch them in our minds.
We don't really know what happened to Maura, and though we learn more and more all the time, we don't seem to be able to solve this mystery.
To date, we haven't been able to come up with that answer, but it's certainly my hope, and I know the investigators working on this case, that we will one day have the answer for the family. Because I can't imagine what it's like not to know what happened to your daughter.
I think some local dirtbag grabbed her. And she was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
In our minds, one of two things had to have happened to Mara that night. And that was either she succumbed to the elements, which is possible, or someone harmed her. Because we are convinced that with the items that were packed in her car and the fact that there was no note, she was not planning on taking her life.
As the days have turned into months, and the months into years, Maura's closest friends still have trouble accepting the reality of her disappearance.
She's missing everything. I mean, we graduated from college, and she missed it. We don't have any more pictures of her. It's hard.
It's just hard to put into words. It's just one of those things you hear in the news or read about, but you just never assume that something had happened to you or one of your friends. Clearly, it's been 4.5 years and the emotions are still here.
We don't want Mara to be gone. We want her to be out there, starting a new life. But we have to face ourselves in the mirror and deal with what we know, the facts that we know. And now, after, all of this time, it's not just our minds that tell us that something has happened to Mara, it's our hearts too.
However heart-wrenching the answer is, Maura's father refuses to give up searching for his daughter.
I'm going to be up here all the time. I'm going to follow up any lead that a local gives me. I'm trying to do everything I can do. My conscience I wouldn't be able to stay.
When did you think, I'm in a cult?
I probably realized I was in a cult the moment the cat stuff started happening. The message Cheryl would give about these cats were they were of God, and that we were to care for them with the utmost care and love and attention. And if we save these cats today, we will be saved in the day of Armageddon or the apocalypse. So we had to take the cats. No matter how many, no matter how much work it was, we had to take the cats. She said, take these cats. You couldn't say no. You did not have the right to say no. Like if we said no, then we'd have to leave. And why would you leave the person that's going to save you when hell's going to break out on earth? Why would you leave that person? You better just, buck up and take care of the cats so you don't die.
This is a story about family, faith, and felines. In the Pacific Northwest, a Pentecostal-style preacher
How deep has the covenant cut in your hearts?
manipulates her followers' emotions.
The words she uses, the pulpit that she uses to draw people into her web. That's dangerous.
How come I was such an idiot?
Embraces bizarre beliefs.
Behold, the bride is crossed, as she is unveiled to come forth into her power.
She went from being a woman of God to a nutcase.
Our homes were filled with cats. Cats.
And moves to silence her doubters.
One violent move, one severe cut, and Jesus' head snaps.
She pounded it in my head that he'd gotta go.
Cheryl wanted Mark killed. Remember, always think like Satan if you want to figure stuff out.
I think once you start down the path of evil, there's no end to it.
These photos go back, some of them before Mark and I got married in 2006. Mark had 2 boys and a girl. I had 2 boys and a girl. It was seemingly a perfect matchup. My name's Mary Walker, and I'm the wife of Mark Walker. We came together with a lot of hopes and dreams for a blended family, for the Brady Bunch. And this was, back at a time when we were still operating under the illusion that we had a great future in front of us as a blended family. And it was really apparent real fast that was going to be difficult to achieve. Mark was really transparent and honest about what his ex-wife, Cheryl Walker Ruffin, was involved in, even at that time. When Mark first told me about Cheryl, I tried to get as familiar as I could with her. Although, it's hard to think about, how do I take it that his ex-wife is the bride of Christ? Not sure what to do with that.
Behold the bride.
Cheryl Walker Ruffin is a Pentecostal-style preacher based out of Bellingham, Washington. Her charismatic fire and brimstone-style preaching has attracted around 200 followers, and she's gained a reputation for pushing the boundaries of traditional faith.
I think the first time that I met Mark's children was a trip to Whistler. We took Mark's 3 children and my 3 children, and then a friend. So there was baptism by fire, 7 kids, and a dog. When I first met Cheryl, it was after that trip to Whistler. When we got to the house, Cheryl was already in the driveway waiting for us. And so we went into the house and started unloading suitcases out of the car. And all of a sudden, Cheryl came in through that opened door. And she's in the living room. And I just remember standing in the kitchen thinking that Cheryl was a bit of a threat.
Mark and Cheryl divorced in 2004. The settlement resulted in 50-50 joint custody of the children, but eventually the children spent more and more time with Cheryl. Now, in 2008, Mark's continued presence in the lives of the children is a source of frustration for Cheryl.
Mark never bowed the knee to what Cheryl wanted. And Cheryl wanted to be the prophet, the pastor, and he was to be the subservient one, the one to uplift and allow her to follow God's calling in her ministry. So when he did not do that and he called her out on her, she was angry. And not only did he call her out on her, he divorced her and he fought for his rights for visitation with his kids. She did not want him to have any part of their lives or her life.
One violent move, one severe cut, and Jesus' head snaps. And she has his attention.
She was always trying to put herself out there as a victim of Mark. She was telling her congregation that he was manifesting demons, that he was a devil named Baphomet, and that I was a reincarnated temple whore named Ashra.
Desperate people do desperate things.
She despised Mark. She thought he was of the devil. And at the time, anybody in that inner circle, she would tell us he needs to die. That for her to go forward with what God's calling her to do, he had to die. So I remember in these smaller groups of prayer circles praying for his death. So I did that, and I'm very ashamed of it now. But back then, I thought he was evil and that he needed to go.
In 2008, a new member enters Cheryl's community, a man from New Mexico named Rick Madrid, and almost immediately he sticks out from the rest of the congregation.
I'm a heathen kind of guy, you know what I mean? I'm just a guy. I ride motorcycles, and I grew up on horses and horseback, and I'm one of those guys. I drink beer and I fight.
So Rick Madrid visited the church as a guest, and Cheryl was on him really quick, love bombing him, prophesying over these great prophecies.
He had this reputation as kind of a bad boy, and there was a seduction that happened.
She's nice looking, so there was a physical attraction as well as, you know, this good girl that she proclaimed to be. And when her and I would be together, when we were together, I mean, I would have visions. And there was some weird stuff going on. I mean, there was times where her and I were making love, and I'd close my eyes, and we were floating down a river, and we were going under the water and in and out, down waterfalls. She got stronger and stronger the longer I was with her. She is something. I don't know what that is, but she is something.
He was seduced by her, and he ended up moving up to Bellingham, moved into the home, and then they married.
Everybody would walk around the church and proclaim how Mark is going to die. How she explained it was a spiritual thing. And I was the new spiritual father and the spiritual husband. I really thought that he was just going to follow her dead. I really did. She had told me constantly that Mark was supposed to die. And then he wasn't dying. And it was getting to her. It was bugging her bad.
And Cheryl starts commissioning Rick to do an evil deed.
In Cheryl's world, there are no accidents at all. So she pounded it in my head that he's got to go.
What will you do to attract my attention? How will I sort your prayers from all the others?
You never said no to the prophet. Never. And Cheryl wanted Mark killed.
Literally, she pounded it in my head that he's got to go. She went and bought an AR-15. We shot. We shot 1,000 rounds probably. And then it was little questions like, so how far is that over there? So then I'd shoot it. Well, how about that one over there? Can you hit that one? So it was going farther, right?
Mark and I lived here for 10 years. Rick Madrid was here several times. Cheryl was with him in the car. She was sitting next to him. She was probably taking him through the layout of our home. And he knew what our driveway, what our approach looked like. And she had him here telling him all those details about our everyday life. And one day it culminated with him being at the top of the driveway. Mark was outside. Rick Madrid had the rifle with him and he leveled the sights.
So I went down there one day and I sat down the road from his house. Him and his wife were outside. And I was in the pickup. And I had him in the scope.
And he had the rifle with him and he leveled the sights and he had Mark in his sights. And he had a God moment. And he decided not to pull the trigger. And we're certainly glad he did.
I'm very grateful. My name is Mark Walker, and I am the father of 3 children that are in a cult. And my ex-wife is the leader of that cult. I didn't know at the time that Cheryl was saying that I was the devil. I didn't know at the time that she was telling everybody in the cult to pray for my death. I didn't know at the time that she was going around and having my kids talk about different ways to kill me. My own children, I don't want to believe that my kids are evil, but they might be. I think once you start down the path of evil, there's no end to it.
The way I think about it now is ridiculous, man. I would never have gone to do something like that. I know that I was manipulated. The guys in her church were soft-spoken. They have no balls. They're not men. And then when she met me, I was different. So she kind of had an idea of the kind of guy I am. I think she had planned it all along.
What do you think stopped you?
Had to be God. When I put the rifle down and I drove away, I just knew that God had intervened.
Now, there's something to keep in mind. Mark did not learn about this attempt on his life for several years, and he never reported it to the police. So any fallout about this alleged murder plot, at this point, it's just between Cheryl and Rick.
When I went home, I said, if Mark Walker is supposed to die, why did God just intervene and save his life? Explain that to me, Prophet. Oh, you're more full of than a Christmas turkey, I told her. I could have easily taken him out. And because I didn't, Cheryl threw me out.
If there ever was time of criticism against Cheryl, she would nip it in the bud as fast as she could. She publicly humiliated people all the time. If you spoke illy about her and she found out, she would admonish you in front of everybody and embarrass you.
I watched her humiliate men in front of their wives by making false accusations. She's the prophet. When you say no to the prophet, you suffer the consequences. If you did not do what Cheryl wanted you to do, especially something of that magnitude, you could pretty much count losing your life.
I met Cheryl in Spokane, Washington. My mom told me that I should go meet this gal that was working at Nordstrom's. She was attractive, friendly, charismatic, so I asked her out. We only dated 6 months before we were married. I was 23. I didn't understand who she was and what she was thinking, and I didn't date her long enough to figure that out. 10 months after we were married, we had our first child. We had Colin first. 3 years later, we had Landon. 6 years later, we had Olivia. I felt like it was my responsibility to stay married and figure out how to make it work. I was raised in a very conservative Christian family, and I always wanted to go to church, and Cheryl wasn't into church until she found Gates of Praise. At Gates of Praise, you would see things like people speaking in tongues, people doing exorcisms, taking demons out of people, things that I wasn't used to.
When Mark met Cheryl, she didn't seem particularly interested in religion, which is curious. In some ways, her discovery of Gates of Praise and the time she spent there is the origin story of a cult leader.
Gates of Praise was led by Debbie Lynch, and Cheryl was very attracted to her preaching.
He's looking for the leaders that will say, I need to cross over.
They became very, very close to the point of, I would say it's almost like an affair. I don't know if they were ever physical. There's a question that I don't know the answer to. But Debbie made her kind of like an associate pastor, and she loved that position of leadership.
My time, people. You're either going to love me or hate me, but you better have an opinion by the end of this night. Amen?
Listening to her sermons, it's clear that Cheryl relished the attention of her congregants and found her power to be intoxicating. In 2001, she split with Debbie Lynch and established her own small church called Freedom Fire Ministries.
Cheryl had no training to be a pastor. She'd never read the Bible, barely.
The purpose of all demonic soul ties is to bring you under that spiritual canopy of authority.
It made no sense whatsoever.
So here's the godly soul tie, here's the ungodly soul tie. The ungodly will buddy up to the godly soul tie, and all of a sudden I will start manifesting symptoms of cancer.
But I guess if you say enough things over and over again, something will come true, and people believed that she was a prophet of God.
When I came into the ministry, it definitely was mainstream Christianity. And then as she began introducing these different religions, well, the diehards believed Cheryl was this prophet of God. And it wasn't Cheryl telling us to include these other religions, it was God telling us through Cheryl.
And the people that sit within the temples and the sanctuaries will not be held captive anymore by your hands.
She really was the joy in the center of this congregation. People wanted to be close to her. She was enigmatic, charismatic. She had a knack of reading people in the moment they met.
In the beginning, it was a place that you wanted to go because you felt that freedom, you felt that warmth, you felt that acceptance.
Come into the place where you can taste of what was and what is to be, that you walk in the wisdom of all ages.
As time progressed, we started getting into Catholic mysticism. We got into Egyptian alchemy, and then it was paganism and Wiccan and Mother Earth and chakras and crystals. There was a lot of talk about the end times. There was definitely this sense of dread, and something bad was about to happen. And we had our only salvation was following Cheryl.
I didn't believe in what she was doing, but I wanted to stay close to my children because I was trying to figure out how exactly I could get them out of this thing that they were trapped in. But in a cult situation, you can't have any dissension. So anybody that doesn't believe has to be separated and culled from the group. She decided, well, I'll use the police to get rid of Mark. Cheryl accused me of pushing her. I didn't touch Cheryl. I spent a night in jail. And that's actually the night I said, okay, I have to call my divorce attorney. I got to get out of this.
Whatcom County dropped the charges against Mark because there was no evidence to support Cheryl's claim he was violent. Even so, it appears Cheryl has cunningly manipulated the criminal justice system to get the result she desired.
During the divorce, it was taught that I should never say anything negative about Cheryl in front of the kids. So what I tried to do is just love the kids. I tried to be dad to the kids. And then you find out that Cheryl was telling them to pray for my death, was telling them at dinner to go around the table and figure out ways to kill me. I was being a nice person. And it was very frustrating because I could see that I was losing. I didn't know what to do about it.
When the divorce was finalized, the custody arrangement was in fact a 50-50 split. And as Mark feared, it created a permanent fracture in his relationship with his kids. For Cheryl, sowing family division is part of a pattern.
I was a churchgoer in North Vancouver, and that's where I first met my wife. We got along famously. The first 3 years of our marriage, we did almost everything together. But in 2002, things took a bit of a turn. That's when I was first informed about Freedom Fire Ministries and Cheryl. She just announced that she and her friend had been going there for some time. I was quite surprised by that because I worked 2 out of 3 Sundays. And on the Sundays that I was off, we were going to our church as though nothing was going on. And then, one day she just outright said that she was going to a place across the border and she wanted me to come. From the moment I said I would go, the demeanor of my wife and her attitude towards me changed. Like, total turnaround. All of a sudden, she was in love with me again.
What makes your covenant cut a full circumcised heart?
Cheryl would literally have everybody, totally focused on her. Every word.
No fruits. They can't even sustain themselves, yet pour into somebody else. How come, people?
That was her favorite thing. Come on, people.
How much would you cast in, people?
On one occasion, I was there, and she had a pitcher of water and a new box of salt. She walks up to it, pours the salt into the water, stirs it up, and says, I need everybody to come up and drink of this salt water to purify, our souls or something along those lines. I can't help but think back in my mind about the Jonestown experience and how Jim Jones had run many trial runs prior to the poisoning of all his people that had followed him.
Jim Jones was a Messianic American cult leader in the 1970s who convinced followers, including women and children, to drink fruit punch laced with cyanide. The mass suicide resulted in the deaths of 900 people, including Jones himself. So this little saltwater communion that Rod observes is incredibly alarming.
This was a trial run, and I think she was taking note of any hesitancies, but I didn't see much of that at all. Everybody was willing to go and do it. My wife has now been there for at least a year, maybe longer, and my children exposed under this crazy ranting and raving about end time. I can just picture my wife ushering my children up to the Kool-Aid. Can you hear her drink? Yeah, I was scared.
Kind of rusty. I was born into a Christian home. At a very young age, I knew I had to hide my true self. My first crush was on the girl in first grade, and I was in kindergarten. But because of the religious upbringing, I just knew I needed to hide that part of me. It was a time of fear, depression, sorrow. I would constantly be at the altar trying to pray the gay away. When I was 17 years old, I decided I'm going to teach myself to play the piano. I very much felt like everything was spiritual, everything was from God. So this gift of music was from God. So 2004 came along, and I was 27 years old at the time. I didn't feel like I truly fit into a spot where I could show my gifts in music. And I was looking for something more.
You say, God, I'm standing at the crossroads. I've heard the word, Father. Give me the guts to make the choice.
When I started attending Cheryl's church, it was lively. There was life. People were joyful and joyous. And my sister Rachel, she joined the ministry at the same time that I did, or quickly thereafter. One Sunday morning, I was sitting at the piano and Cheryl was sitting on the front row. And I just started playing and singing. And when I started singing, Cheryl started to weep and fell to her knees and started praying and crying. She's telling me, you have a gift inside of you. And when you speak to people, they will hear and they will be healed. And I'm like, what? Yes, this is what I want. But this beautiful, eloquent woman is speaking to me of what I dream of. So that connection between us was pretty strong.
Cheryl's power as a cult leader includes her ability to identify the needs and desires of others. But it's what she does with that knowledge that makes her dangerous.
I was definitely enamored by Cheryl. As she started drawing me in closer, I was falling in love with her, I guess you could say. One evening, she invited me to meet her at our church. We're in the church at the altar. It's just us. The lights are low. I went down to kneel next to her. And she turns to me and says, it's time for you and I to go into covenant. Meaning not necessarily like a marriage, but like being one with the other person. You trust each other, you belong to each other, and you do the work of the Lord together. And she said, for us to be in covenant, we have to kiss. So there on that altar floor, I went in 110%, and I kissed her. This is hard to talk about. It felt like forever in that moment, like I found the person I was going to be with forever. There were times she would tell me, now what you and I have, this isn't homosexual. This is from God. But there would be services where she would preach against homosexuality. Then a couple nights later, like, yeah, we're banging. I would say there probably was some conflict in my heart on that, but I was ready to lie my face off because I finally had what I wanted in a relationship with another woman. It was magical for those first 4 months. And then things changed. She had me in her bedroom and we're sitting on her bed and she says, this part is over. This part is done. We are no longer together like that. Everything went into like this whirlwind of heartbreak and I was crushed. I was in love with her. I was in the worst place in my life I have ever been in. When I look back at Cheryl pursuing me, I think it was about the music. I think it was about me bringing that extra oomph to what her ministry was through music. Looking back, that's what she wanted. But the sad part of it is, I didn't leave ministry. I believed that if I left her, that I would be in a horrible accident or I would just simply die because I stopped believing in her. And that's how deep she got into my psyche. That I could never leave her or God would strike me dead.
I'd like you to tell me what you hear. It's not done yet. My name is Sanjan. I met Cheryl online on Spiritual Singles in June of 2009. She had her own church, about 100 to 125 people in her congregation in 2009 when I was involved with her. She was well kept, the family was well kept. She looked good in lingerie. But the relationship was mostly compliance with Cheryl, and that went downhill really quickly. She didn't like the art I had in my house. I had paintings hanging, and among them are a couple of nudes. She declared the paintings portals for evil. She demanded that they be burned. I took $50,000 of the most beautiful paintings in the world and burned them in the backyard fire pit at Cheryl's demand. And I can still to this day not believe that I did that. I knew better. I looked at myself and said, how come I was such an idiot?
In her relationship with Sandra, Cheryl is clearly harnessing her ability to control, but this time on a subject outside of her church community. It's not long before Cheryl returns her focus back to the congregation and pushes them to new and strange places.
Cheryl had this knack of bringing in a new religion or a new practice and tying it to what we were already doing. We would be doing Catholic mysticism one night, and the next night we're out in the woods together around a fire singing songs to Mother Earth. As Cheryl began this direction with her congregation, she said it's time to start adopting cats.
Now, cat obsession in religion isn't entirely new. For example, the ancient Egyptians believed that cats were vessels that could be inhabited by their gods. But like most things Cheryl Ruthven adopts, she pushes her version to the extreme.
The message Cheryl would give about these cats were they were of God. And if we save these cats today, we will be saved in the day of the apocalypse. And that's when we changed to Eva's Eden.
Our shelter is a cage-free shelter. That means everyone can really interact with the kid that they think is the right one for them.
Eva's Eden became a nonprofit organization that we started to go to shelters throughout Washington, and we would take their cats that were on the roster to be put down. We would bring them into our homes. We would bring them back to health, feed them, care for them, and then start taking them to Eva's Eden, which was now a public place people could come to on the weekend to adopt cats.
The cats that were there were adorable. I mean, who wouldn't want to adopt those cats?
But the thing about Cheryl, 1 or 2 cats saved was not good enough. So she began working with shelters across Washington. Volunteers would pick up between 30 to 50 cats, sometimes more.
People were required to leave their homes, their jobs, to come straight to the sanctuary to pick up their chosen cats. Cheryl would stand up and say, when you take these cats home, they are your number one priority. They come before your husbands and wives, and they come before your children. So they had to be fed first. All their areas had to be clean and spotless before you could even have breakfast and get your children off for school. And then she made it a competition. She would say, well, they've got 35. Why can't y'all step up? Y'all need to step up. You have 20 cats in one room, and the other 25 roaming your house. We had litter boxes literally in our living room, our dining room. It was disgusting. You could never keep the litter boxes clean. Have you ever smelt of a litter box that had not been cleaned in days or weeks? Well, multiply that about 100 times, and that's what your house smells like. I was pretty much a basket case. I was short-tempered. I cried a lot. I had a lot of meltdowns. When these cats came, if we said no, Cheryl would publicly humiliate me. I have examples of people being exiled from the church when they disobeyed her. They lost their jobs. They lost their housing. They lost their footing. I can't tell you how. She just had the connections.
What's your best? What do you treasure?
The cats were important to Cheryl because they were to be the vessels that would save all of us, I guess. The cats would eventually turn into a human. I don't know how to put it in words because it doesn't make sense. She went from being a woman of God
And God is really trying to teach us. We love the person, but we don't like the spirits.
to a nutcase.
Archelian is a death spirit. He's very powerful. And so that's what you're sensing. He's on his way.
I would go home and say to my husband, Ricky, I cannot do this. I don't care if she's called a prophet. I don't care if she's the one. I will never put Cheryl over you. And I will never put Cheryl over God. When I shared that with Ricky, he's like, we've got to get out of this, Connie.
How deep has the covenant cut in your hearts?
The demands that Cheryl is placing on these families are outrageous. The only bonds that they have left are to each other, to their loved ones. Cheryl is really testing their devotion to her. One of the questions I have is, what will Cheryl do if they finally break?
I went to my friend's house. She opened the door and I just fell apart. And I said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. My kids have to come first, not the cats. My friend held me tight, let me cry. But I didn't even get home 15 minutes before there was a knock on the door because she had already told Cheryl everything that I had shared with her. Everything. This is evil. You have to have permission for everything. You can't leave. You can't go anywhere. You have to be approved by the prophet. And I knew that Cheryl would publicly humiliate our family, humiliate our children, do things that our kids could possibly never get past. I wasn't willing to let my children be humiliated. Never.
Cheryl's control over her followers is powerful enough that members are policing each other on her behalf. So you have to wonder, how much worse will it get?
Lots of family photos of just good times through the year. But as we continued to be a family, the anger grew on the part of his children. Their resentment became more and more apparent. I always felt like they were really being used as pawns by Cheryl. Like they were vehicles for her anger toward Mark. But there came a time when Mark came to the realization that if I ever saw his children, that I should run the other way and call 911, because there was only one reason why they would be here, and that would be to kill me.
You want to come up here? This is her favorite spot. Ugh. Come on. That's where she loves to lay down and look at her kingdom. I knew I was in a cult about 2007, 2008. There was a point in time where Cheryl shut the doors and no newcomers could come. We became a secret religion. And the cat rescue was a front that we hid behind. That's what the outside saw. They didn't see what was on the inside. Our homes were filled with cats. Cats. If you can imagine the distress a cat's in, being around 30 cats, what are they going to do? They're going to piss on the walls. They're going to scratch the carpet. They're going to scratch the walls. A typical home had between 14 and 30 cats in it. I had 17 in my home at that time. The home usually smelled like bleach, a combination of bleach and cat piss. People's homes were being destroyed. People were losing sleep. Cheryl would have us being up every 3 hours to make sure that they're okay and feed them and clean them. It was overkill. It was too much. I think that's probably where those seeds started to grow in my mind, that this is a little bit bull. My sister and I were so close, but we were always afraid to talk to each other about our true feelings. Like, we never talked about our concerns about what was going on, because if I told Rachel, or if Rachel told me something, what if Rachel told Cheryl what I just said? People would do this. People would tattle on other people, and then when Cheryl found out, she would act upon it swiftly. She publicly humiliated people all the time. I knew I needed to get out of there, but I was so groomed, or I was so afraid I couldn't act on it, and I didn't want to leave my sister.
I am the Alpha and I am the Omega. I am the beginning and I am the end. I am the start and I am the finish.
This is really dangerous. Cheryl is demanding trust from all her followers, but she's also creating distrust within the group, weakening the bond they all have with each other. And she's always looking to push it one step further.
We, as a ministry, went and saw Da Vinci Code together. And that is probably the pivotal point of Cheryl beginning to say she is Mary Magdalene. She has come back to the earth now as Cheryl, but she truly is Mary Magdalene.
It's interesting that Cheryl chose Mary Magdalene, because we know that she pulled her inspiration from religious texts, from pop culture, from all over. And in the early 2000s, the Da Vinci Code was hugely popular. First the novel and then the movie. The revelation in Da Vinci Code is that Mary Magdalene was no prostitute. She was Jesus' wife.
My bride is coming forth in power, cloaked in my son's blood in this hour. Bride of power, people.
Cheryl is now portraying herself as Mary Magdalene, wife of Jesus, and her followers are buying it.
Communions with Cheryl, at times she would prick her finger or cut it and then squeeze the blood out into the communion, and then we would drink the communion because she was basically Jesus and we were to consume her blood. It kind of grossed me out a little bit, but you conform. Everybody does conform, or you pay the price. So I drank the communion with her blood in it.
Cheryl is constantly pushing her followers out of their comfort zone, testing their boundaries, keeping them on their toes. But as she refines her control tactics, you have to ask yourself, what is she ultimately after? What's the point of all this?
I was expecting a income tax return check. We had already talked about using to pay off some bills and maybe get a little bit ahead, not much, right? The check arrived, and I didn't know about it. My then wife took the check to the bank and cashed it and took the money out and opened another bank account. I had felt in my mind that maybe she was planning something.
When that transpired, I became concerned. Something just didn't feel right. Hi, I'm Rod's sister. My name is Carol.
Rod has something that not everyone has in this situation. He's got family members outside Cheryl's grasp who know how to research, and that's what they do. His sister Carol compiles a file of all sorts of correspondence with Cheryl, thinking maybe we're going to need this down the road.
What happened next was what happened in September when my brother, out of the blue, was given an ultimatum.
She came up to me and said, I have until the September 24th to submit to Cheryl and her teaching leadership. I believe she actually called it leadership, and turn over the family finances to my wife, or she was going to leave with the children.
That's stunning that somebody would say something like that to a spouse. That if you don't comply with what I want from you, I'm going to take everything you value from you. How much worse can it get? It's as bad as it gets.
That was a Saturday, and on a Monday I went to work as I always did. Everything was normal in my household. And I came home from work and the house was empty. And I went into my son's room and there were all these goodbye cards. I had absolutely no idea where my children were, where she was. I came to understand that she had been plotting this for some time.
Now, that was on a Monday. Tuesday, we were in court. Well, all the research was ready to go. We got before the judge that day, and Rod went through everything systematically.
The judge alluded to the fact that my wife had surrendered her autonomy to Cheryl. The judge at that time believed Cheryl and the ministry and its members posed a clear and present danger to the children.
My brother was given interim sole custody, sight unseen, even though we did not know where the former wife and the children were. So for the next number of days, we were racking our brain trying to figure out where they could be.
I was terrified. Where is my wife gone? If she made it across the border, they're going to hide her. And who knows where? Am I ever going to see my kids again? My worst fears had come to fruition.
The kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent will take it by force. There's the cut of covenants.
My wife was gone. We still didn't know where she was. They were gone for 8 days, and I received a phone call. And she said she was going to return the children to me because the court had ordered her to do so.
So the children are with Rod, and for 6 months, Rod and his wife attended marriage counseling with a minister whose focus was on reconciliation.
My wife declared in this counseling that she was no longer going to Freedom Fire, and that she had returned to the church where she and I had met. I ultimately believed that she had left because, 6 months had gone by. Every sign had showed that she was not attending there. We would go to the court and announce that we were forgoing divorce and that we were going to return together as a family.
Now, there's another element to this plan. Rod agrees to let the children change their primary address to her house while they look for a new house that the family will eventually move into, and they'll all be back together, reunited. But it doesn't turn out the way Rod expected.
I remember her sitting in a lounge chair in her backyard, and I went to talk to her, and she said, I've been going to Freedom Fire the whole time. I've now established status quo with the children here, and I'm keeping them with me. It totally blew my mind. Everything was going in the right direction. My family was about to be restored, and now it was all a dream. I was financially broken, emotionally broken, and I did not have the means to fight.
She has deceived him. She's tricked him into getting the kids because she knows that now that the kids, with his consent or with her, it's going to make it that much harder to unwind it and for him to get the kids back. Now, the financial angle to Rod's situation is interesting. It sure seems that Cheryl and his wife intended to shake him down. But if you look more closely, a pattern seems to emerge. It sure looks like Cheryl creates division among her followers and then exploits them for financial gain.
Cheryl always spent more than I made, and I made a pretty good living. In the divorce settlement, if you calculate everything that I gave her in that package, it added up to about $750,000. Even though she told the congregation and my children that I wasn't paying child support, that I'd left her destitute.
All offerings that we give within our temple are not equal offerings. Our tithes we are commanded to do.
Cheryl would just rail into us over and over again, tithe and offerings, give money for this, give money for that. I definitely gave above and beyond when I did cash out on my ESOP with the company I was with. I had about $100,000 in my pocket, and I would say at least half of it went to Cheryl. But money wasn't truly going to where she said it was going. It was to better enhance her and her family's lives. Cheryl had millions. We barely had thousands. But she wanted everybody's. In 2009, we adopted our 6th kid. That particular year, the Internal Revenue, they were paying adoptive families monies back, especially if you were adopting special needs children. We ended up with the refund being $28,000. We gave her $7,000 of it, not to mention the amounts of money that we gave toward the cats. Cheryl was getting the cats from the shelters at no cost, but we did have to pay for all the food and the litter, and then we had to pay adoption fees. Then all of that went into Cheryl's pocket. Each cat was no less than $75. And even if you adopted 2, you still didn't really get a break. You still had to pay $150. We would have to buy particular cat food, the particular cat litter, and we had to buy it from Cheryl. Cheryl bought it in lots, and then we were required to buy it from Eva Zedin. It was actually very costly. And, for us to find out later on that the monies that we were giving was going for her to have plastic surgery, breast implants, and increase her woman size or whatever. It hurt me.
This is unbelievable. She is a consummate grifter with 150 followers. Each household has at least 20 to 30 cats. It seems like she's making probably hundreds of thousands of dollars off the backs of her followers. It's almost like this twisted parasitic game. Once she has a follower compliant, she's going to extract all the value she can. And the key to compliance is to separate her followers from the people that give them strength. You divide and you conquer. You divide, you conquer. It goes on and on.
And the blood came from the mercy seat, and it bubbled and came down.
The sacrifice.
You were family until you weren't. She wanted us separated. I think that if she had her way, she would have separated Ricky and I. And Ricky did speak that one time. He's like, I feel like she's trying to tear us apart, and I don't understand why. He says, I believed that she was real in the beginning, but if she's a real true prophet of God, why is she trying to separate us? We were getting phone calls about my father-in-law and how he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's and how we needed to get home if we wanted to have any time with Dad. And so I know it may sound awful, but we used that, and we didn't let anybody say no. We took a trip. We come all the way down to Louisiana. I could actually tell you the date. It was July 5th, 2012. We drove out of Bellingham, Washington. It was truly a freedom. And it wasn't until after we got out that she figured out that we were not standing behind her. We did not tell Cheryl exactly where we were going. It was for our own protection.
I know they still were rough a little bit after we moved to Louisiana, but they weren't as rough as they were in Washington. And we didn't adopt you so that you'd have a miserable life. We adopted you so you could have a good life.
My name is Faith Hughes, and I am Connie Gibbs' daughter. I was adopted at the age of 6, so when we left Washington, I think I was 12.
I think if we did not leave, I don't know what would have happened to our family, but I don't think that we would probably be together. I don't think we would be together now either, if we hadn't left. You understand the danger that we were in the middle of? Just, I guess this is where I should tell you I'm sorry.
When we were down to Louisiana, I was glad that they did them. I wanted friends, and I wanted my family, and I wanted my happiness. So I was actually very grateful that it happened the way it did.
I was Olivia's 18th birthday. I had lunch with her the Wednesday before her birthday, and I told her that I wanted to give her a present and that I wanted to see her on her birthday. And so I was surprised on her birthday when I couldn't get a hold of her, and her phone was dead. So then I tried Cheryl's phone, and it was dead. And then I tried the boys' phone, and they were dead. And so I thought, well, I better go out to the house and see what's going on. I went up to the house. I saw there were no cars in the driveways, and I could see in the window that all the furniture and everything was gone. And I initially rang the doorbell, and then I could see in the door it was completely empty. I was frantic and devastated, and I called my wife, and I was at a loss what to do. Where could they be? I had no idea what was happening.
Cheryl's move was based on her youngest daughter, Olivia, turning 18. Midnight of that night, all phones that they had were turned off. All phone numbers that Mark Walker had ceased to exist, and they traveled to Tennessee that night. Cheryl told all of us in church services, lie to leave. So the kids were lying to their father. He had no clue. Just one day they were gone.
Prior to Olivia becoming 18, there was a parenting plan that said that we'd share 50-50 custody until she was 18 and graduated from high school. So I then went to the school, and I got to the school, to the counselor, and the counselor said, oh, didn't you know she graduated early? That she graduated a month ago. At that point, I knew that they were gone, and I was never going to see my kids again.
I really feel it was because Cheryl wanted to give it to him. She wanted to teach him a lesson that would break his heart in two. She succeeded in doing a very cruel thing to him.
It's painful. I mean, it's painful at the time, it's painful now. The question is, what should I do about it, or what could I do about it? I wish I had the answer to that. I really do.
Everything indicates that Cheryl had been planning this move for years, and that she felt Mark's presence in the life of their children was a constraint on her spiritual ambitions. I mean, she allegedly tried to have the guy killed, for goodness sake. Now that she's escaped the watchful eye of her nemesis, what's next? What does she plan to do?
Do you not know that I am perfecting you in this? That I am creating something so beautiful? Something that I wish to call forth with such a power in this hour, but it only comes by the hand of Satan.
As we were preparing to move, Cheryl said, "You don't tell anybody you're moving because of me or the cats." I was going to caravan with this family that was driving this bus for Cheryl. And in the bus was cats, chickens, guns, and gold. We were moving all the precious items for Cheryl. It was so shady.
What kind of guns?
So the guns were in the long cases. So whatever kind of gun you would hold like this. I was in turmoil. I was lying to my parents about why I was moving. I was lying to my job and people I cared about at my job while I was leaving. It felt like boulders in my heart to have to lie. I knew I needed to get out of there,
but I was so groomed or I was so afraid I couldn't act on it.
Eventually, Mary on Facebook was doing searches, and somebody posted that Cheryl and Olivia bought a horse in Tennessee, and that's how we ended up finding them.
When she moved to Maury County, she bought a 42-acre piece of property up on a hill with cash for almost $1 million.
I called the sheriff and said I would like to have a welfare check done on my adult children. The sheriff, instead of calling my adult kids, called Cheryl, who's their abuser in my mind. Cheryl, of course, told him that I was a terrible being and, the devil. And so when I called back to the sheriff, he basically said, well, you're abusive, you're not to be in contact with them, and if you come here, we'll arrest you.
When I found that out, that really pissed me off. Why would a man who's a law enforcement officer make a call like that? My guess was he saw the voluptuousness of her top end. I could be wrong, sorry to his wife, but they were bowling balls in a tight sweater.
Now, remember when Rod got that court order that prevented his ex-wife from taking the children and moving into the United States? Well, because of that court order, his ex-wife and children could not move with Cheryl to Tennessee. But they did continue to follow her from afar.
I knew that my former wife, given the opportunity, would pick up, drop everything, and go to wherever Cheryl would go. She was so locked into everything Cheryl presented to her. Unfortunately, my children today are still, through their mom and her connection, still with Cheryl, under her control.
What would you say to anyone who's watching who still follows Cheryl?
My advice is run. Run as fast as you can, as far as you can. Grab your family, leave everything behind, and go. Get away while you can. You could be next.
The words she uses, the pulpit that she uses, the power she invests upon herself to suggest that she's God here on earth, and to utilize even her sexuality to draw people into her web. That's dangerous. I've heard people say, oh, she's done so much for me. I have to ask, what has she done for you?
I moved to Columbia, Tennessee, got a job, trying to make ends meet, living with all these families and cats, and it wasn't fun. I wanted out of her control. I wanted out of this ministry. I wanted to live my life and be me. So I produced music. I met another musician, and we clicked right away. And I began to confide in her this hell that I was living in, and I don't know how to get out. Where do I go? I've got 14 cats still in my care, and she says, just move in with me. Just leave, and we'll make it work. She gave me the courage to leave. I came out to my sister and said, Rachel, this is the relationship I had with Cheryl. We had an intimate relationship, and I'm gay, and I met another woman, and I've fallen in love with her, and I'm leaving the cult. And my sister cried, and I cried, and we finally were able to tell each other all the painful things that we went through under Cheryl.
Mary's experience perfectly illustrates why cult leaders like Cheryl isolate their followers, because social interactions are the biggest threat to their influence. Sometimes all it takes is one ally. It could be a friend or it could be a family member to empower, to convince the follower to just walk away.
I said, Cheryl, I met someone online. I've fallen in love with her, and I'm leaving to live with her. I'm done. She started love bombing me again. She would send me these letters, emails of how much she cares for me and that she needs me in her life, and please don't leave. And I said, no, I need to go. I've seen other people walk away from her and she turned nasty and vindictive. She was not that way with me. The next day or two, I got a call from her strongman, the Muscles, saying, you need to destroy everything you have, pictures, songs, videos, you destroy it right now. And I was so desperate to get out of her claws. I was like, fine, I don't care, I'll delete everything. And I did, and I regret it. I should have just said I would. And no, I deleted almost everything. The reason why I think she was much softer with me is because she's afraid of what I'm doing right now. I'm talking about my story, and I'm stepping up to say, this is what happened.
After we became aware that Cheryl might have commissioned a hitman to kill us, we decided that the best defense is a strong offense. As soon as I found out where they were, I put up the Facebook page, Is There a Cult in Columbia, Tennessee? Just trying to make people aware of, the devil next door. And then it evolved into a vehicle for other people to tell their story.
Mary Walker's online efforts draw the attention of a journalist who eventually publishes a long-form essay about Cheryl's ever-evolving cat-centric ministry. As the public in Columbia, Tennessee is becoming more aware that a despot lives among them, Cheryl's paranoia grows.
I was home and, I had hoped that Cheryl had been long put in the past. On a rare occasion, I decided to look up her name. And up comes this podcast.
From Cast Media, this is The Opportunist, a podcast about regular people who turn sinister.
Yeah, we shot and shot and shot. We shot 1,000 rounds, probably.
This person by the name of Rick Madrid is essentially admitting that he had been in a conspiracy recruited by Cheryl Walker Ruthven to commit murder in Washington State.
Now keep in mind, while Cheryl's congregation knew who Rick Madrid was, prior to his appearance in this podcast, the alleged plot to murder Mark Walker was not widely known.
I thought that her and I, once we consummated our marriage, that Mark was going to die. She had her whole church pray for Mark to die. The whole church. So she pounded it in my head that he's got to go.
What Rick Madrid said in the tape, that's alleged. We don't know. But should it be investigated? Absolutely.
Mark and Mary Walker did not learn about this alleged attempt on Mark's life for several years, and they never reported it to the police, so it's never been investigated properly. There are a lot of questions about this whole affair, so we tried to locate Rick Madrid. And we were surprised by what we found.
Hello?
Hi, is this Rick Madrid?
No, Rick Madrid passed away a couple of years ago.
Oh, he did?
Yes, he did. He had sleep apnea, and they claimed, the doctors claimed that he just died in his sleep.
Oh, man, I'm sorry to hear that. I had some questions about his experience with Cheryl. Do you know anything about Rick's Cheryl?
No, I sure don't. He moved out there to Washington and was up there about a year and then came back home and didn't talk about any of it.
So Rick appears on this podcast, and months later he dies. Could that be a coincidence? Absolutely. We know that Rick was living in New Mexico when he passed. And New Mexico does not release death certificates to anyone but family members. And we couldn't locate a published obituary, so we cannot independently confirm his death. For former followers of Cheryl, that raises a lot of questions.
She has a finesse about her that convinces people to do whatever she wants. The fact that he backed out of what Cheryl would want him to do, and the fact that Rick went public with it, put a mark on his back. I believe Cheryl is dangerous, but I believe she's more dangerous with the power that she gets over people, because she's the prophet.
I find it suspicious that he died of unknown causes. Cheryl did ask Rick supposedly to assassinate her husband. What else does he know that could damage her and her reputation even more than it is already? I believe Cheryl could potentially be capable of orchestrating someone's passing. And if she can ask for that to happen, what else can she ask for if she feels cornered and has no other way out?
I got a message from one of the producers saying, "Is there any way that Rick Madrid may have passed away?" I was kind of surprised and upset by it because Rick ended up being a good friend. Like, if you can be friends with your hitman, we were friends with the hitman.
We've been told that Rick died of sleep apnea. It's possible, but be kind of unusual. We've been told he had a brain aneurysm. Some have suggested that Cheryl paid him off to disappear. But what is consistent is that everyone we've spoken with who knows Cheryl and heard of Rick's passing thinks his alleged death is suspicious.
Right now we're traveling into Bellingham from our home. I have an appointment with Rick Madrid's nephew, Randy. There's so many questions surrounding Rick's death. Like, everybody that knows Cheryl knows what she's capable of. We're concerned for Rick because, there's questions like, did he die of natural causes? Was he killed? Was he killed by somebody under the influence of Cheryl? And I'm hoping that Randy can answer some of them. Yeah, I'm gonna grab this. Hey, Randy! Okay, so hide the camera. Hide the camera. I'm going back in. Holy.
You with us?
Rick told him that Cheryl wanted him to kill us.
Yeah.
So I just got done speaking with Randy and confirmed everything that Rick had told me on the phone back in 2016. Well, yeah, and it wasn't just Mark. He said, that Cheryl wanted him to kill Mark, myself, and our whole family.
Now, Rick obviously spoke about the attempt on Mark's life on a podcast, but this is new. We did not know that Rick was allegedly tasked with killing Mark's entire family.
He knew that Rick has passed away, but he is not sure how he passed away. He's heard several stories from his family, and they've all given him a different story.
So why are we even theorizing about Rick Madrid's death? So if Cheryl is complicit, then this doesn't look good for her, to her followers, and to the community if it gets out. Now, the alleged conspiracy to murder Mark Walker can't be prosecuted because too much time has lapsed. The statute of limitations has passed on conspiracy. However, there is an angle investigators might consider when examining Cheryl Ruthven and her cat cult. It's not the most eye-catching of crimes, but it has brought down some of the nation's most notorious criminals.
People have asked me in the past, what Cheryl is about and what motivates Cheryl. And I think the easiest, shortest answer for that is money.
If Cheryl's doing anything illegal, it would be with money. Pilfering money from her followers, not paying taxes on it, and putting it into an offshore account. I would say follow the money. People who spent a lot of time in the home thought that there was no delineation between personal, ministry, cat rescue. If Cheryl needed money, it was all her pot. Now she has at least 3 accounts offshore in Panama. I have no idea what's in there, but somebody should. Where's the gold? Where's the silver? Where's all the precious metals that she transported from Washington? There's so many question marks, and I still have all those question marks as we sit here today. Why isn't anybody looking at Cheryl Ruthven? It has come to my knowledge that Cheryl no longer lives in Columbia, Tennessee, but she has picked up roots again and moved to Columbia, Kentucky. I think she needed to change where she lived because she was in the spotlight. From what I understand, they've started a new rescue, so it's no longer Eva Zeden, it's Da Vinci's Dream. And now it's not only cats, but now they're inclusive of dogs. My guess is, again, they're hiding behind another animal rescue.
Tax evasion and financial fraud are crimes that are prosecuted at the state and federal levels. If Cheryl's nonprofits and other entities are investigated and evidence of wrongdoing is found, it is possible she could face criminal sanctions, whether it's a fine, or probation, or even a prison term. In the end, any sanction imposed would pale in comparison to the pain and suffering Cheryl Ruthven has wrought on those families that she has torn apart.
The level of control that this person has. You ask me if she's dangerous, I say she's dangerous. She destroys families. She destroys people.
I haven't spoken to my children since the day they left, which is February 11th, 2013, so 11 and a half years. My children aren't children anymore, they're adults. I told them, even before they left, that what they were going through was difficult, and they'd be 30 before they figured it out. Well, they're 30 now, and I don't think they've figured it out yet. I don't know what to do there.
I am so thankful for that woman that gave me a place to land. But life happens. It wasn't meant to be with her. And I met the most incredible woman who is now my wife. She opened her heart and her family, and I have a stepdaughter now. And now I have a family, and I have this incredible career, and this beautiful home, and I didn't go crazy. I would say, if anybody's listening to this that's still stuck in a very deep, dark place with someone who manipulates you and tells you if you leave, these bad things will happen to you, I promise you it won't. You will only find life and authenticity on the other side of those lies. I still like cats. I liked cats before Cheryl tortured us with them. As you can see on my shirt, I have Black Cat, a representative of my last Eden cat. Her name is Evie. So yes, I love cats. Cheryl doesn't own cats. She doesn't own their mystery or their, peculiar ways they make us laugh. And I love them. I love cats.
Twisted tale where bank robberies, secret identities, and treacherous lies lead to one of the bloodiest mass murders in a city's history.
It was absolutely horrifying.
This is where one body was found, 2 more were found in the rear of the property.
This is a crime your imagination can't even wrap itself around.
I couldn't believe that this was real.
On the outside, it looked like they were a perfect family.
But one of them is harboring many shameful secrets.
He was in desperate need for money. His business was failing. He was bankrupt. He didn't tell his family or his girlfriend any of this.
And he is getting married in 3 weeks.
What is he willing to do to conceal the terrible truth?
One way or another, he has to keep the lie going. He's a cunning chameleon, and he masks his evil side.
You have no idea what his face looks like.
Find out as we uncover the lies, shocking secrets, and deadly deceit that could lead to cold-blooded murder.
You would have never seen this coming.
I was screaming and crying.
Gentleman in the driveway, boy, it's just covered in blood. This shows the lengths people will go to try and protect the lie.
On the northern shores of Lake Ontario is one of North America's most populated cities.
Toronto's an amazing city.
It is consistently ranked as one of the best cities to live in. There's people from all over the world living here.
It's incredibly diverse. There's incredible food, nightlife, sporting events. There's always something going on. It's an excellent place to raise your family.
The Ryan family reside in a family-centered working-class suburb.
Scarborough is a neighborhood in the east end of Toronto.
You have the Scarborough Bluffs by the water, beautiful parks. It's a nice place to live.
The Ryan family consisted of Susan and Bill. Bill was a long-time employee of the Toronto Star, but he had recently retired.
Susan Ryan was a homemaker and avid gardener.
She was known for having one of the best gardens on the street.
And they raised 4 sons.
Chris was the oldest.
He was a collector for the Toronto Transit Commission. He had a long-time job there, lived on his own, was still close to family. Leland was an artistic young man. He was studying photography at a university in Toronto. AJ, the youngest, was enrolled in a gifted school. And there was also Brett Ryan. Brett Ryan is the most outgoing personality of everyone in the family.
He was a good-looking guy, and he was very charming. He had this little smile that melts hearts.
He had attended the University of Toronto, but dropped out, and started his own painting business, which was quite successful.
To their friends and neighbours, the Ryans are your typical Toronto suburban family. If not slightly mysterious.
They were a family that kept to themselves for the most part.
Closely guarding their many family secrets.
Susan was, to a certain degree, very controlling.
She kind of keeps to herself. AJ, the youngest, is on the spectrum and had very few friends.
Leland was very introverted.
Even Brett is struggling with some personal issues.
On the outside, he seems very bubbly and charismatic. His painting business is going well, but he's really down about himself. He feels he's a failure because he dropped out of the University of Toronto.
And he was dealing with a relationship that ended in a way that caused him significant sadness. And so he was fighting some depression, but not telling anyone about it.
Fortunately, Chris is there to offer his brother's support.
Chris took his position as oldest pretty seriously. He wanted to be a good role model for them.
Lisa Junkin is a lifelong friend of Chris Ryan.
Chris was a very good guy. We dated in high school. We connected on a lot of our viewpoints, and he was there for me.
Over the next few months, Chris and his family become captivated by a local news story.
There was a number of bank robberies in the east end of the city, in the Scarborough area,
that the Toronto police was simply unable to crack.
The person who was robbing these banks looked like an old man.
He had glasses and a hat, and he would limp into banks and then hold them up.
He'd approach a teller and would slip the teller a note. And the note would read that there's a gun in the sling to give him the money, and they've got about 60 seconds.
The robber would get away with $1,000, $2,000.
What's startling is that he'd strike 2 banks in the same day, a few miles apart, with the same disguise. This really piqued the media and the public's attention.
It was getting a lot of coverage in the newspapers, on the TV.
So they gave him a name, Bearded Bandit.
For the Ryans, these robberies hit too close to home when Chris's friend Lisa almost comes face to face with the mysterious masked criminal.
Some of the banks were in my neighborhood, and one time I pulled into the parking lot at the same time as the police pulled into the parking lot, right outside the bank. I'm thinking, if I had gotten here 5 minutes earlier, I would have been here. I would have been in danger, so I was very worried.
So far, the Bearded Bandit has gotten away with over $25,000 from a dozen different banks.
How is this guy getting away with this?
And police have no leads.
He picked banks that gave him an easy escape.
These banks are typically close to a major highway to make a quick getaway.
And police were unable to, through any type of forensic evidence, identify the culprit.
No fingerprints, no DNA. There's nothing to go by.
The only thing they do know is that the Bearded Bandit is not who he seems.
When they blow up the videotape evidence they have of him, they realize that his skin is not all wrinkly. He was using theatrical beards and disguises to mask the fact that they were a young person.
In the following days and weeks, life goes on as normal for the Ryan family. Brett and Chris go to work. AJ and Leland attend school, while Mom and Dad keep busy at home.
Little did anyone know what was to come.
To catch the bearded bandit, police stake out several bank branches located near highways.
At one point, there were more than 24 police officers that were working this case, trying to anticipate which bank he would hit up next.
The bearded bandit does strike again, but not at a bank under police surveillance.
And he somehow vanishes. This person left the police mystified. Who's the bearded bandit?
They still don't know who it is.
And he hopes no one finds out.
You would have never seen this coming. Brett Ryan was the bearded bandit.
This was a massive secret that he'd been keeping.
A secret that will lead to deadly consequences.
A witness was able to identify the getaway vehicle.
Time may be running out for Brett Ryan's hidden life and identity.
Brett Ryan's secret was beginning to unravel. There's a saying, oh, what a tangled web we weave when we conspire to deceive. If you looked at Brett Ryan, he just seems like a normal, good-looking young man.
But no one, especially his family, knows that he's living a dangerous double life.
He was the bearded bandit. That's a secret he's keeping to himself.
Brett Ryan was a crafty individual. He was excellent at keeping his criminality, bank robberies, a secret. We're talking about 13 bank robberies over the span of 8 months.
Getting away with up to $28,000. But what Brett doesn't know is that law enforcement is closing in on him. His pickup truck was spotted fleeing the scene of his last robbery.
He had a brand new pickup truck.
It's very distinctive.
Red in color with another unique characteristic.
This vehicle has ground lighting. It's an unusual feature.
So they start pursuing that lead.
Patrol officers are told to be on the lookout for a red pickup truck matching the description. And after several days, they catch a lucky break.
A police officer ends up seeing the very vehicle. So they run the plate.
They get the owner. It's Brett Ryan.
But they still don't know if this is the bearded bandit.
Police do a background check on Brett Ryan to see if he has any priors. They're surprised by the result.
He had no prior criminal record.
Usually, criminals have records. This guy came out of nowhere.
Police consider the possibility that they may have the wrong guy. To be certain, they begin to watch Brett Ryan's day-to-day activity for any suspicious behavior.
They see him doing fairly typical young man things.
He's going to lunch with his friends. He's going to the gym. He practices martial arts.
After a few days, Brett Ryan does something that catches the surveillance team's attention.
They observed him casing out different banks.
He simply looks around, sees where the cameras are, sees where the exits are, and leaves.
That's their first clue that they have the right person.
And then they followed him to a bank further west.
And then, sure enough, he was slowly driving by in a way that is suspicious. But they still don't know if this is their robber.
The answer is revealed when Brett Ryan pulls over and exits his vehicle.
He was in full disguise.
And was wobbling into the bank.
Knowing he's potentially armed, police exit their vehicles with their guns drawn.
And he's apprehended right there.
When they arrested him, it came as a shock to the entire family.
To learn that your son or your brother had been the one who was behind the bank robberies that were happening must have been absolutely shocking.
Chris was very upset. He said, "Do you remember that bank robber that they were talking about, the bearded bandit?" And I said, yeah. And he says, "Well, it was my brother Brett." I was in disbelief.
So are the neighbors.
Well, imagine you live in a quiet, residential neighborhood, and the next thing you know, emergency task force officers, armed to the teeth, surround a house in your neighborhood. This was an unforgettable moment for that neighborhood.
Inside Brett's bedroom closet, police find several large bills, a bank anti-thefting pouch, and one of his hold-up notes. Word of the bearded bandit's arrest reaches the local media.
After everything had come out in the news, Chris was telling me that his mother was very upset because this brought shame upon the family.
This was a very private family. This is the worst thing that could happen to them.
They wonder how could their wonderful, loving son, Brett, be a serial bank robber. His subsequent trial will reveal several reasons why.
Brett had a lifestyle he wasn't able to afford.
He really enjoyed the high life. He bought designer jeans, Versace belts, a new Ford F-150 truck, which was worth about $60,000.
He needed the money from the bank robberies to support the lifestyle that he was portraying. One of the other things that was identified that contributed to the bank robberies was that he had been in 2 relationships where he spent a lot of money on his partners, and he was dumped in both of those relationships.
So he felt as though he needed to overspend to compensate for weaknesses in his personality or insecurities about his romantic relationships.
To make matters worse, Brett's painting business was struggling.
He was in desperate need for money. He had $60,000 in debt.
Brett got in way over his head, and he didn't see a way out.
In this desperate period, he resorted to robbing banks.
Brett's family had no idea he was in so much financial and emotional trouble.
They were shocked by the secret that he'd been keeping.
Chris was hurt by that because Chris felt that if Brett needed help, he should have come to Chris. He could have done something for him.
Brett was facing 15 years in prison.
He will end up being sentenced to much less.
One of the things that Brett Ryan had going for him at the sentencing stage was that he had a tremendous amount of support from his family and friends. They all stood behind him. They provided letters of support. Everybody was convinced that this was a crime that was completely out of character for Brett Ryan.
This is someone who had no prior charges or convictions, and it's convincing for the judge.
He had lived a stellar life before robbing banks. He had a promising future. They believed he was a great candidate for rehabilitation. He was sentenced to 5 years, which is extremely light.
Brett is a model prisoner, and after 2 years in jail, he's released on parole for good behavior.
But there were a number of conditions of his parole when he was released.
He was required to speak to a therapist. They said one possible issue that you might encounter in the future is problems with romantic relationships.
They believed that he had unhealthy, intimate relationships that depressed him and led to the series of bank robberies. So the parole board decision said Brett had to report any intimate relationships to his parole officer because they wanted to minimize his risk of reoffending.
When Brett is released, he tries to pick up where he left off.
He was trying to rehabilitate and better his life, but it didn't go as he had planned.
He is encountering issues because he has a criminal record.
His painting business collapsed because people wouldn't trust him because he was the bearded bandit.
Brett's criminal past is also negatively affecting his family.
His mother was very worried about, what would the neighbors think. The public persona of the family was very, very important to her.
They led a very quiet life, and suddenly they were notorious. Susan Ryan was really upset that there was so much gossip about her family.
The public scrutiny becomes too much for the Ryan family, and they decide to leave their lifelong home and make a fresh start in a new neighborhood.
They felt they had to leave because their reputations were tarnished by Brett Ryan's criminal activity.
Resentment and anger fester and will eventually culminate in a ghastly crime.
I thought, there's no way that this could be happening.
Brett Ryan's notoriety as the infamous bearded bandit has created some serious repercussions for him and for his family.
They sell their house and move to another neighborhood, a little bit west of where they were, It was pretty unsettling for the family. It was very difficult for them to go back to normal. But they had to get a fresh start. So Bill and the 4 sons worked together to help renovate the house. It needed some sprucing up.
And Susan is able to seize on one of her major passions, which is gardening.
It looked like the Ryans were going to go back to the lifestyle they had before the Bearded Bandit incident.
Brett knows he needs to prove to his family he's a changed man and is going to get his life back on track. He continues to see his court-appointed therapist.
And he was even able to get a job at a fast food restaurant downtown.
And goes back to school. He re-enrolls at the University of Toronto.
He was going to study biophysics.
There's a lot of excitement within the family over this. He's going to school, he's working, and making headway in his life.
Even more encouraging, around the same time, Brett's love life takes a promising turn.
He meets a beautiful, athletic physiotherapist named Kristen.
Brett and Kristen met through a blind date, and I know that they hit it off pretty quickly.
They were both into sports. They attended hockey and baseball games. They enjoyed going out with friends. They were a perfect match, and they very quickly fell in love.
Brett's family is thrilled for him.
They all thought very highly of Kristen, and they felt that she was good for him. He wanted to be better for her. As cheesy as that sounds, she made him a better man.
So much so, Brett decides he needs to come clean to Kristen about his criminal past.
Brett was completely honest with Kristen and told her that he had been the Bearded Bandit and that he had done some time in jail. She took that information, mulled it over a little bit, and said, okay, that's who you were. Now you're here with me. I love you. She was very forgiving. That takes a very special kind of person to be able to do that.
To Brett's surprise, Kristen's family is also supportive.
They see him as a young man who made some mistakes in his life. He paid his price, he did his time, and is now moving forward on the right track.
Not long after, Kristen invites Brett to move in with her.
Brett Ryan's girlfriend had a condo downtown that overlooked the lake.
She had a very good job in the healthcare industry.
And Kristen was willing to support him while he worked his way through school.
From the outside, it seems as though Brett Ryan has bounced back and started a new life that is incredibly promising. You know, he had gone back to school. He had an incredible girlfriend he was making a life with.
Brett appeared to have everything together.
But the reality is, the appearance that he was on the right track wasn't quite accurate.
In truth, Brett's life is in serious danger of completely falling apart.
One of the conditions he had as part of his parole was to notify the parole officer of any relationships he had.
Because it was identified as a trigger for his criminality. But he kept his relationship with Kristen a secret from his parole officer.
If they find out, Brett could face serious consequences.
One scratches their head as to why he would do that.
It turns out Brett is also keeping other secrets from his loved ones.
He was struggling in school, but he's not telling anyone about it.
But Brett and all of the Ryan family will face a crushing blow when tragedy strikes.
Bill Ryan was suffering from medical problems. He died suddenly.
Bill Ryan's passing was very difficult on the family. He was the glue that held the family together.
It was a shock to the system. Chris was very upset. He was very torn up about it.
His mother, Susan, is especially distraught.
For Susan to be widowed relatively young, that took a toll. You know, she wasn't expecting to be alone so early in her life. She was feeling vulnerable.
Thankfully, her children are there to offer support.
Brett Ryan stepped into the void left by his father. He would go to his mother's place and help around the house. Brett was very handy, obviously he was a good painter.
And he's paid for it. You know, I think his mom realizes it helps him and it seems fair to compensate him for his work.
That was the bridge that allowed Brett to contribute where he can in his relationship with Kristen. For instance, he might pay for dinner or an activity.
It also allows Brett to buy something very special for Kristen.
He proposed to her with a beautiful ring. She was swept off her feet. Of course, she accepted.
Brett's mother is thrilled at the news.
She was over the moon.
It looked like they had a very promising future.
Little does anyone know the terrible truth.
The lies never seemed to stop,
leading to a startling conclusion.
You would have never seen this coming. It's out of a movie.
Susan shares Brett's exciting engagement news with her friends and neighbours.
Susan Ryan was bragging about how he was about to marry this beautiful, successful medical professional, Kristen, and he's going to finish university. She's so proud of him. It was a huge wave of relief.
After losing her husband and going through everything she did with Brett, for her, there is light at the end of the tunnel. He seemed like he had turned his life around.
But there are more hidden deceptions and lies.
Secretly, he's falling apart.
Brett had everyone believing that he was going to school. But in fact, he wasn't a University of Toronto student anymore.
Brett had dropped out, never made it past the first semester.
He didn't tell his family or his girlfriend any of this. And he would leave the condo in the morning to give the illusion he was continuing to go to school.
In truth, Brett is spending most of his days at a local library until it's safe to come home.
This is a lie that he has to maintain every single day. In many ways, it's easy because Kristen leaves the house. She's not home all day to see. She's clearly not in school.
Brett Ryan is really adept at concealing things.
So well, he's able to conceal his secret for the entire duration of his university program.
Brett was able to maintain the lie of going through university and actually graduating to the point there was a celebration.
He must have been exceptionally convincing to be able to pull that off.
Chris didn't have a clue. I didn't have a clue.
Neither do his other brother's mother or future bride.
For Kristen, she's thinking her fiance is a university graduate. The reality is that she's with a university dropout. Brett believed that if Kristen knew the truth, she would leave him.
Fortunately, all of Brett's problems may soon be a thing of the past.
Brett secures an incredibly lucky break.
Somehow he gets a job with an IT company, and it pays a pretty substantial salary.
For Brett, it couldn't have come at a better time.
He had a wedding that was coming up.
It wasn't going to be on the tape. For Susan, this was a big relief. You know, her son, who she's been paying to do odd jobs around the house, has finally secured a salaried job.
Brett can support himself now and provide him and Kristen an income.
Because up until this point, Kristen had been carrying the load for them financially.
But the good fortune will be short-lived.
Within days of getting the offer, his new employer discovers he's the bearded bandit.
And he was fired.
He's totally stunned. He's in shock.
Of course, he didn't tell anyone in his family or his girlfriend this.
This would be another failure on him, and he was afraid of the outcome.
To deceive Kristen and his family, Brett tells them that the IT firm has allowed him to work from home.
That makes it much more challenging to detect that there's anything wrong. Kristen got up in the morning, left for her job, and was none the wiser that he didn't go to work that day because he was saying that he was working from home.
This shows the lengths people will go to try and protect the lie.
But now there's a new problem. Brett needs a reliable salary to help pay the bills.
Kristen's social media postings portrayed a fun-loving, great life.
They would do events in the city, they'd go out for very nice dinners.
And take an expensive tropical vacation.
The issue was that this was money he simply didn't have.
Brett's in a dire financial situation.
Will Brett come clean to his loved ones? Or like before, bury the secrets?
It was only a matter of time before that came to light.
he was pretty miserable.
Just when Brett Ryan gets a much-needed break, the walls come crashing down on him again.
He did get a job with an IT company, but then they found out that he was the bearded bandit.
He was fired almost instantly. He didn't even start the job.
But Brett is able to convince others that he still has this job by working from home and that he is bringing in money. But in fact, Brett had no income coming in, so the bills would have been piling up.
Particularly with the extravagant wedding he and Kristen are planning.
And it was going to be really a high-class affair. He's in over his head financially. It's almost the same thing as when he's the bearded bandit.
And like before, he sees no way out.
I'm sure that he felt that if Kristen knew the truth, she would break up with him.
He's also afraid how his mother, Susan, may react.
His mother was a little bit of a loose cannon.
Or his older brother, Chris.
In his mind, they're not going to help me.
Brett instead asks for help from a non-family member. His court-appointed therapist.
He revealed that he was dealing with some depression at the time because there have been compounding secrets that he's been keeping. He doesn't have a job and didn't graduate from university.
So Brett Ryan's therapist advised him he should come clean. He should reveal these secrets he harbors.
You have to tell everyone that you're living essentially this lie and have been for some time now.
I think it became clear to Brett Ryan that he was not going to be able to maintain his lies any longer.
Brett decides to take his therapist's advice and reveal his secrets, but only to his mother.
Brett's hoping his mother will agree to keep it a secret and help support him until he got a real job so he could afford the wedding and marry Kristen.
Susan's reaction is not surprising.
Susan Ryan is utterly shocked and devastated. The son she believed has turned his life around is living a life of secrets, of deception, of manipulation.
She tells him that she can't keep this secret, that he has to tell Kristen.
She said, "You cannot start a marriage on a lie. That's wrong. You can't do that. If you don't tell her, I will."
Brett was taken aback by that response from his mom.
He's not going to come clean to Kristen. He sees that as doomsday.
He feels as though his whole future depends on this marriage and he doesn't want anything to jeopardize it.
Brett feels he's left with no choice.
He'll do whatever he has to do to conceal his secret life.
Over the next few days, he purchases several mysterious items.
It's not quite clear what he's doing.
A clear picture begins to take shape back at his condo building.
In the condominium that they live, there are obviously security cameras in the elevators and at various exits. What Brett does is he cased the building to see where the security cameras are.
Upstairs in his bedroom, Brett pulls out a duffel bag that was hidden in his closet.
And in the bag, he's got a wig, a hat,
dark glasses, and something else.
He has the same beard as he had when he was the bandit.
It's a dangerous path he knows too well.
This time, Brett Ryan thought things through to a great level of detail.
The next morning, he puts his desperate plan into motion.
Kristen gets up, as is her normal routine. She gets ready for work, and she leaves.
Now that he's alone, Brett pulls out the items he purchased a few days earlier. Oscillating fan, wooden spoons, and electronic timers.
The oscillating fans were set up on timers
so that the fan will turn around and it will touch the enter button that will download videos from YouTube. And the other one will tap it so that his emails will be sent at different times during the day.
The whole intention of what he had done was to create for himself an alibi.
So it looks like he's at his computer all day.
If the police come to question him, Brett would be able to say, "I was home the whole time."
Brett has another deceptive trick up his sleeve.
He goes down 14 sets of stairs through the back door where he knows he won't be videotaped.
Brett leaves his condo for what will be the last time ever and takes the train to Scarborough.
Which, of course, was where he was robbing some of those banks several years earlier.
Will his plan succeed? Or will it go terribly awry?
This is a crime your imagination can't even wrap itself around.
It's just so tragic.
Brett Ryan is on a train heading towards his old bank robbing stomping grounds.
No. This can't happen.
It's a crazy plan.
In a surprising twist, after Brett arrives in Scarborough, he doesn't head to one of the nearby banks.
He instead walks to his mom's house.
It turns out Brett's been planning something else entirely.
He hid something in the garage. His plan was to confront his mom Susan and force her to be silent about his secrets, or Kristen will discover his lies and break up with him. So he has everything riding on this confrontation with his mother.
But this conversation does not go well. She says, "I'm not holding on to this secret for you."
They start arguing.
As a result, Mrs. Ryan contacted Christopher to come over to try and defuse the situation and calm Brett down.
Brett Ryan realizes that he has very little time on his hands, so he's now forced to escalate his plan.
Brett goes into the family garage
and pulls out a deadly weapon, a crossbow.
Susan goes into the garage, following her son, wondering what's going on, and Brett realizes he doesn't have time to load the crossbow.
He grabs one of the bolts. And proceeds to stab her in the face. She does not die. A struggle ensues.
It was absolutely horrifying.
She fought for her life, but she's no match for Brett Ryan.
Susan eventually succumbs. Murdered by her own son.
The fly in the ointment was she phoned Chris. Chris is going to come over, discover she's dead, and realize that Brett didn't.
So he sits and waits for his brother to arrive. And this time he does have the time to load the crossbow.
Chris comes into the garage, discovers his mother on the ground, and is horrified. She's bleeding. She has a yellow nylon rope wrapped around her neck. He's totally focused on her.
And while Christopher is kneeled over, Brett Ryan proceeds to execute Christopher.
He fires a crossbow bolt through the back of his head and kills him instantly. I think his plan was lose the bloody clothing, escape in disguise as the bearded bandit, so when he leaves the property, he will be unrecognizable.
But it doesn't go as he'd planned.
Unexpectedly, his younger brother, AJ, comes home. And he's realizing AJ can't be a witness to this. And so he attacks AJ outside the house at the driveway with the crossbow bolt.
Huge scream that comes out of AJ. This alerts his brother, Leland, who's upstairs. Leland rushes outside.
There's blood everywhere. Clearly, AJ is in need of help.
Leland says, "We gotta phone 911.
Not knowing the true horrors of what's going on, Leland dashes back inside the house.
Brett follows him.
If Leland lives, it's done. There's no amount of lie that's going to get Brett out of this.
Leland is in a fight for his life. Somehow, Leland escapes his grasp and runs across the street to a neighbor. He begs his neighbor,
"Call the police. Call the police."
Suddenly, Brett knows it's all over.
Brett Ryan at this point has given up. Before the police arrive, he sends an email to his fiancée, which states, I'm sorry, Kristen. I'm so sorry. I've destroyed everything and everyone. I've been hiding a terrible secret. I wish I could make it make sense. I can tell you more when I see you.
By the time police arrive, Brett is sitting on the front stoop, just waiting for the police to get there.
I was one of the investigators at the scene. I was completely stunned by what had transpired. AJ was deceased on the driveway, and Christopher and his mother deceased in the garage. It's the greatest number of victims I had dealt with at one particular scene, and the only time a crossbow was ever used.
One of the concerns was, could there potentially be other victims out there?
There was concern for his fiancée because they were not able to get a hold of her.
They were able to track her down to the condo lived at, and when the police arrived, they knock on the door and there's no answer.
They forced entry into the apartment and then found all these devices set up.
So the police see this and they don't know what they're looking at initially.
They were concerned that there might be explosive devices given all the timers and all the wires and equipment set up.
And they immediately sent in the bomb squad. They had to evacuate the whole building.
Police have also revealed that there is a connection to an evacuation on Queens Quay. A building near York Street was cleared out around 2:30. The evacuation remains in effect this hour and traffic in the area is blocked off.
The bomb techs went in, took a look at it, disassembled it, and found out there was no safety risk. They were just set up essentially for an alibi. We were able to locate and speak with his fiancée later in the day, and she was okay and completely stunned by what had transpired.
It's an unimaginable crime that shook the city to its core.
Lived here for 21 years, and I'm very shocked.
It's very sad to hear, and it was very shocking to hear. It happened in our quiet neighborhood.
This was a massive news story. It is not typical to hear about a triple homicide in this city.
You can see a forensics tent set up on the driveway of this home. This is where one body was found. 2 more were found in the rear of the property.
I thought, no, there's no way that this could be real, because I talked to Chris. You know, we were texting just a couple of weeks ago. I couldn't believe that this was real.
Brett Ryan is convicted and sentenced to life in prison for murdering his mother Susan, brothers Chris and AJ, and the attempted murder of his final family member, Leland.
I don't understand how somebody could choose this path of killing your whole family to hide a secret. It just doesn't make sense.
You have Leland, who... I mean, how do you live with the fact that your brother killed your entire family and tried to kill you? And then Kristen. Kristen's life will never be the same.
Her heart was just shattered in a million pieces. He ruined so many lives, not just cutting the lives of his own family short, but everybody in their circle that was impacted by this horrific crime. They won't be the same.
I tried to go back to life as normal, but nothing has ever been normal again. It's as fresh today as it was back then. It never